Well, First Peter chapter 3, verse 15. This is one of the, I think, I want to, it's hard. I was going to say it's one of the most important verses in the whole Bible. The problem is, I don't think there's an unimportant verse in the Bible, really. I mean, it's all God's Word. However, for me, there, this verse 15 holds a lot of stuff, power, it does set me up to make sure my goals and objectives are right. Well, in verse 15, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. I already talked about it. It's hard for me to not come back and talk some more about it. I love another translation that reads, but set apart Christ as Lord in your heart. If we are not doing that, there's almost no reason to do anything else. Nothing else in the Christian life works until we set apart Christ as Lord in our hearts. We revere Christ as Lord. That I don't know that we ever get done looking into our life and observing to what degree we still need to elevate Christ to the position of ultimate owner, boss, Lord. And then he goes on, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. We started in on this last time. I think there's still a well, let me just say, I'll fill up my full 15-minute objective here, just thinking more about what is here. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Always be prepared. We have to do the work. We have to put in the effort to be prepared. Now, not everybody is going to find this kind of effort difficult. Some people, they thrive on it. And if you're one of those people, may your tribe increase. But there are a lot of the others of us who we really have to do the work to explore and research and study. So the preparation, good news on that is there are many wonderful resources, and with the internet at our disposal, there are more things out there than you've got time to dive into. I'll just put it that way. But prepare, make yourself ready ahead of time to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Now that's an interesting thing, because it sets us up with a dilemma in a way. So do I go after people to give an answer to? Do I present my answer? What do I? Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And different people are wired so differently. There are people who their main way of introducing Jesus into conversation and into relationships would be to have kind of a apologetics approach. But this implies something that's worth taking a closer look at. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you. Now, and he goes on to say, here's what they ask. They ask you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Why would anybody ask me to give the reason for the hope that I have? The only reason I can think of is that they observed in my life a kind of hope they want in their own life. They observe the way I treat them, I treat others, I treat myself, and there's something appealing about that. They're curious. I think if Christians lived in a way that makes the people around them curious, not about how did they get so weird, that we got plenty of weird in the world. We don't need any more. And the church is loaded to the gills with weird people, me being one. I don't think that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when I live my life in a way that others look into it, observe it, and say, I want some of that. How'd you get that? Now, hope is what Peter says is the hook. And I don't think he's using this idea in a manipulative way. I just think that he knows something that we need to get our hands around, that it is hope that makes the gospel attractive. Have you noticed how rule keeping is not really what makes the gospel attractive? If you haven't noticed that yet, you need to look around, because we live in a world where there's already plenty of rules, but honestly, there's not a whole lot of people that get much of a thrill out of keeping rules. I think we also live in a world that is in short supply of hope. I'm in the day, this current moment that I find myself in I'm recording this at the end of July in 2020 from the Heartland in Edmond, Oklahoma. There's a ton of indecision and confusion and anxiety and fear, and we have this pandemic panic thing that it keeps us stirred up. And I'm not telling you what you ought to think about all of that. I'm just saying, if you don't carry hope, you're going to get nailed, especially right now. Hope is in such short supply. So there's good reason to have hope for you. One of the great things about hope is that it creates a thirst, a hunger, a curiosity in people who observe hopeful people. I want you to think about who do you know who's not just goofy and stupid and they ignore the facts, right? They're just this outrageous optimist. That's not the person I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who tends to look at life realistically, and yet in the midst of that realism, they seem to have hope. Those are unique because those people don't appear very often in the world. But when they do, there's an attraction. There's I would even call it a magnetism. That's the kind of person that Peter is. I don't know whether he's expecting it or he's suggesting it or urging it, but I know this much. In the first century, the gospel spread to the entire known world because people demonstrated hope in such a way that the people around them wanted to know. They asked about the hope. Before we get all wrapped around the axle of how do I explain that to somebody, here's a very important thing. I got to have it. I have to have hope nurtured in me before anybody's going to ask me about that hope, right? I believe there are lots of Christian men and women and even boys and girls who they've never been coached toward hopefulness. It's not easy there are some things about temperament that make hope easier for some people than others, but that doesn't explain the whole thing. There are times and ways in which hope is difficult to grasp onto. We have this privilege, this honor of having hope. Your hope has to do with the object of your hope and how solid and firm and dependable and reliable and honest and noble that hopeful thing or person is, that determines the scope, even the limit of your hope. Hope and faith are not the same thing, but they really are. How would I say it? They're both in the front seat of the vehicle. One may be behind the steering wheel, and then the other may be behind the steering wheel. But faith and hope, they can steer one's life, and their absence in a person's life creates all kinds of disruption and problems. Think about personal relationships where hope is very limited or hope has been evaporated. And one of the reasons hope goes away is because the trust has been broken or busted. I won't go a whole lot into the whole psychology of that, but I just want to say we as followers of Jesus have more reason than anybody on the planet to have hope. Yes, hope for eternity in heaven, hope for an unspeakably beautiful eternity. Yeah. But you know what? We have hope for today as well. It isn't just the pie in the sky. Yeah, there's pie. I don't know whether it's going to be in the sky, but there is such thing as heaven, and it matters. Okay. On the other side of that is that, yes, that hope needs to be secure. But, man, we have got to grow some muscles for hope in the now. Because I think that's the kind of hope that people want to know about. People are going to ask about the hope that you have. Okay, made my point. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. And once they see it in you and they ask, then be gracious about your answer. And that's where he goes next, where he says, but do this with gentleness and respect. I shared with you that for me, the prototype for this would be Ravi Zacharias. I never met him. Wish I had. I've read a number of his books and watched many of the videos that are online of his presentations, and some of the most inspirational videos for me of Ravi's life are when it's a question and answer time, and a skeptic asks a sincere question. He treats them with respect and gentleness. When you get the opportunity to give an answer for the hope that you have, do it with gentleness and respect. Those are two things that seem to be, sometimes, in my experience, seem to be absent from a lot of Christian communities. A lot of fellowships seem to not have a whole lot of gentleness and respect in them, especially toward people who don't believe the way they do, who don't act the way they do, who don't look or smell. You know what I'm saying? I'm not talking about this empty-headed open-mindedness that believes everything is fine, everything is great, you're fine the way you are. But I am talking about how gentle and respectful can we be as representatives of a gentle shepherd, a good shepherd. When we reflect the nature of Christ, I believe we will be gentle and respectful. The fruit of the Spirit, according to Paul, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It takes self-control to express respect. There's a brain full right there. And my challenge is spend some time observing your own life on a couple of things. Number one, what kind of hope do you have? And if you know your hope has begun to flag, who could you enlist to help you get some hope back? Secondly, I want to ask you to look into your own life and evaluate without being judgmental. Observe and then draw some conclusions about your own gentleness and respect. How gentle and respectful are you when you deal with the people around you? Those are big, important things. Okay, I gotta quit. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.